So this is Musescore. It's a bit intimidating at first, but overall, once you get it, it's pretty easy. So we're just gonna start by making a new score. So hit File, New, and we have a bunch of options from title, subtitle, composer, lyricist, copyright, all that good stuff. So if you're doing an arrangement, I would put in composer arranged by your name, and then lyricist is basically where you put the original composer. It's a good format if you're arranging. Now obviously you don't need a lyricist if you're not doing a pop piece or you're just doing your own composition. But for now, I'm just going to type in new score. And we have a bunch of templates that Musescore has provided us. You can choose from a variety of templates. Just in this part of the video, I'm not going to choose a template. I will show you how to make a template later on in the video. So choose instruments. And we're prompted with a bunch of instruments. So from brass, you got your horn, you got your trombones, trumpets. Then you have your woodwinds up here, piccolo, flute, treble flute, all that stuff. And your unpitched percussion would mostly be your drums. Then you have your pitched percussion, like your timpani, glockenspiel, marimba. And then keyboards, I mainly use these. So for now, I'm just going to choose piano. Then hit next. And this is where you can choose your key signature. Anything you do now can be manipulated later. So not everything's set in stone. Just keep that in mind. So I'm just going to choose C for now. So the tempo is 120. That's just a standard 120. So let's just go to next. Then you have your time signature if you need a 3/4, 2/4, cut time, common time, all that stuff. And then you can enter the number of measures you want your piece to be. I just set it at kind of a standard 32 measures. So hit finish. And now we have a new score. So the first thing I want to cover is note input. So you can either press N to toggle the note input on and off. So I could just keep going like this for days. Or I could just click on it. But that's kind of redundant and stupid. But just go with N. And if you hover over things, it will show you the hotkeys, which are very useful. And I highly recommend them because it saves you time. And as the old saying goes, time is money. So you have quarter note, which is 5. Then you have your 8th note, which is 4. And then you have your 16th note, which is 3. And then you have your 32nd note, which is 2. Don't go beyond a 32nd note. It's stupid. 64th note and then 128th note. The only times I would probably see that is in percussion. Possibly. But that is even rare. So, basic note input, I'm just going to press N. And then I'm just going to do C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So these are all chord notes, and to play it back, you hit the back button, and then you hit play. Oh, magic. So I can toggle between measures using the arrow keys, so I can go to the right, I can go to the left. Then I can hit the note values that I want. So I can have an 8th note, 3 a 16th note, and then a 5 for a quarter note. And then it would just play it back. And we also have a palette. You can either have advanced palette or a basic palette. There's a variety of things that these are used for. So For grace notes, that's basically for woodwinds and not much else other than bagpipes, probably. Clefs, you have your basic treble clef above, treble clef below, then your tenor clef. Only certain instruments use that. I think it's viola that only uses this. I think some trombones use tenor clef, but that's still kind of rare. So bass clef, kind of the same thing as treble clef, just bass clef. Then you have your tablature, if you need a tablature for guitar. Then key signatures, to put in a different key signature, you can click and drag, or you can double click like this, so you have a new key signature. Type signatures, they work very similar to key signatures. You can click and drag, or you can double click, just like that. Bar lines, kind of the same thing. Click and drag, double click. And then you have your repeats, so you have end, start, repeat, end, repeat, start, repeat. Just hover over anything that you don't know what it is. Musescore will probably tell you, which is very helpful. Lines, this is probably one of the most important things I can think of. So you have your slur. To put in a slur, here's a good tip for you. I can just hit S, and there's a slur. Now, you can toggle on and off a slur as you're composing. So if you want, I don't know, C, D, E, F as a slur, you just hit C and then the S, and then you go up to the note value that you want. Then hit S again, and it will turn off slur. I'll demonstrate that later on in another part of the video. So that's your basic lines, that's all your crescendos and other things. Arpeggios, upwards arpeggio, downwards arpeggio. Glissandos, these are mostly for trombones and other things such as piano. And then these are different falls. That's basically for trombones if you want to have a certain fall in jazz. It's very useful in jazz. Breaths and pauses. These are very useful for brass ensembles. Brackets, if you want to group trumpet 1, trumpet 2, or a variety of different instruments together to make it nice and neat, I highly recommend that because score formatting and neatness are a great combo. I highly recommend it again. Articulations and ornaments. This is where all your marcados, well, that's your sforzando, and that's marcados, and then you have your formatas right over here. So basically all your articulations are under this roof. Accidentals, this is all your double flats, double sharps, flats, sharps. But you can also toggle in half steps using the arrow keys. So it's very basic. Then dynamics. This is how you put in dynamics. So it's another double clicking thing. So select a note value that you want to be piano or mezzo piano or whatever dynamic you want. I'm just going to put in piano, double click, then forte, double click, and you want to select in between the piano and forte markings. So I'm just going to click this, hold down shift, and then go to lines, and then double click on the crescendo hairpin. Then once I play it back, it should increase, I guess, the loudness, even though that's not really a technical term. Sue me. So that's how you put in basic dynamics. And then you have fingerings. That's if you want for guitar, or I guess for certain instruments that need to be in a certain position because it's the pieces really fast. I've had this in marching band. It's useful if you need alternate positions, especially. But these aren't used as often in brass instruments. Note heads, mostly for percussion. I wouldn't mess with this too much. Repeats and jumps. This is where all your codas will be. I will have a score up later on in the video that will cover codas and how to get it to play a coda. It's a little tricky in Musescore, but once you get it, it's solid. Tempo, you can manipulate the tempo however way you want it. So I can have it 160. So you have it, you can manipulate it however you want. Text, staff text only applies to one instrument, while system text applies to the whole entire score. So if I want violins to play pizzicato, I use staff text. If I want the whole string ensemble to use system text, so basically I want them to use pizzicato, I would use system text. That's what I mean. Sorry. Breaks and spacers. Bagpipe embellishments, beam properties, don't really use those too much. Frames and measures, if you want those, I don't really use those either. And then fretboard diagrams is for any strumming instruments, banjo, guitar, ukulele, all that fun jazz. And that's the basics of note input and palettes. So we're just going to cover this later on in the next segment of the video. So now we're going to look at the drop-down menus, starting with Edit. We have Undo, Control Z, then other basic functions like Control X, which is cut, then Copy, Control C, Paste, Control V, and then Swap with Clipboard. It's a little tricky to get at first, but this is something I'm probably going to cover in a later segment of the video, just not right now for time's sake. Select all. This is if you want to select everything in your score and then copy it over to like a blank template, a new score, whatever you want. And then select section. This is if you would just want like a trumpet from a brass ensemble and you want to transfer it over to a new score or what have you. And then find. That's Control F. This is very useful if you want to jump to certain sections or a certain measure. I'll demonstrate that right now. Control F. So if I want to jump to measure 13, it highlights measure 13 for me. Or if I want to go to measure 20, it highlights that also. Also under Edit, I can add instruments if I want to. So if I want to add a horn, I can add a horn. Hit OK. And now I have a horn. I can always remove it too. So measures, you can always delete measures, or you can add measures. I'll get to that later. So if I want to delete the last two measures, I should be able to do that. So right now I have 32 measures. And now I have 30 measures. But you can also add one measure using Control B. So now I have 31 measures. That again is Control B if you forgot that. And then tools, I don't really use that often. Voices, this is more common with percussion instruments, kind of like drum set if you have a bass drum going and a snare drum going at the same time. Workspaces, I don't really use basic that much, if at all. Advanced allows you to see everything, and basic doesn't. Then preferences, I'll show you how you can manage preferences later, just not right now. Moving on to view, we have the three main things that I use is Inspector, Play Panel, and Mixer. So with Play Panel, it gives you the number of measures and the number of beats, as well as the timestamps, so the hours, the minutes, and the seconds. I don't think I've ever gone beyond probably 5 minutes for a score. But that's the gist of it. This is very basic and minimal, and it's mostly used for transcribing, or at least I've used it for transcribing, so I can cross-check between the piece and what I'm writing, using kind of the timestamp as a guideline. So I can scroll through the score using this. I can adjust the tempo so many percentage points, as well as the volume. Also with View, you have Mixer. So I can either mute a certain section, I can solo a certain section, but I can also change the sound of how the grand piano sounds, basically. So I can put it as Celestia, and it should be able to play back as Celestia. Pretty basic. So that's Mixer, and that's Play Panel. So with Inspector, if you have a collision, collisions are really bad in score formatting. So if you have this type of collision, you can essentially fix it by going back and forth with the horizontal offset and the vertical offset. Usually it goes by 0.25 or increments, or 0.5 increments. So it's very useful if you want to fix collisions. And if you're doing group score writing, I highly recommend using Inspector versus just dragging things onto there and making it sloppy. Sloppiness never got anyone anywhere. So moving on to Add, you can insert measures by basically Control B. That's inserting one measure. And then you can also insert measures. So this is basically how you insert measures. So I can select something and then add measures. And I can add 5 measures if I want to. And it added 5 measures for me. Frames. I usually use frames for putting in pictures. I'll cover that in a later segment of the video. Text. Title, subtitle. So for subtitle, I can put in George, because why not? And you can adjust like the composer, arranger, whatever. And then lines, slur, crescendo, decrescendo. I don't think you would need to use these because they're all in the palettes. Now notes, I can add a note if I want to. I don't think you would want to, quite honestly, because you can do it on your keyboard. Add interval. This is very useful if you want to add like a chord or something else. Tuplets. This is pretty straightforward. You select your measure, you go to notes, tuplets, and I can add a triplet. There's my triplet. So that's the basics of that. Layout. This is if you want to adjust things so everything fits nicely onto like an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Page settings. So I would just use the arrows. Don't type anything in because it just gets messy that way. So I can adjust it however I want. Hit apply and then OK. Then style. I wouldn't mess with this too much unless if you're doing something wonky or cool with jazz particularly. And then plugins. Here's a good plugin if you want to do retardandos, so tempo changes. You can search on www.musescore.org and type in plugins and you'll find tempo changes. This is good for retardandos and accelerandos because it increments from, like, if you have a starting tempo at 120 and you want to go up to 180, you're able to do so with tempo changes, and it will play it back like a retardando, like an accelerando, or a retardando if you want to go slower. So, help. This is very useful if you have no clue what you're doing. So there's an online handbook for reference. They keep updating it. It's great. And that's the gist of all the different sub-menus and the drop-down menus. Moving on to the next segment. So in this part of the video, I'm just going to cover how you make templates, as well as how you change instruments instantaneously. So let's go to File, New. Then let's just make a standard band template. Hit Next. Then we're just going to choose Instruments. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to make a standard template and put this into time-lapse now. And now we're done with our basis for our template. Hit Next, and then we're just going to put this in B flat just because. Let's put it as standard 120, then Finish. And there's our basis for our band template. Now, you see that not everything just fits nicely, so we just want to go to Layout, Page Settings, and then we have staff space. I don't recommend typing anything in. Just use the presets Musescore has. Just use these arrows. It's much easier. So I'm just going to scale this down until it fits. Warning, this might be a little small, so just be aware of that. Hit Apply, and then OK. And now the fun bit. What if I want to change this flute to a piccolo? Well, it's actually pretty simple, but it's kind of obscure. So you right click and then hit Staff Properties. Then under Staff Properties you have the option to change the instrument. Then Woodwinds. Then I can hit piccolo, hit OK, then Apply, and then OK. Now we have a piccolo. This is very useful if you want to go from one transposing instrument to another. So if I want to go from a trumpet to, I guess, a horn, it's really easy. So it's a good, useful thing to have as a skill. So just be aware of that, and I would highly suggest you using it when you need to. But in any case, let's save this template. File, Save As. Let's go down to our disk drive, then Program Files. Let's search for Musescore 2, or whatever version of Musescore you have. Let's go to Templates, and then I'm just going to make a folder for this template called Band Templates. Then under Band Templates, I'm just going to save my band template. Then I'm just going to close out of this. And then if I want to make a new score based off the band template I made, I should be able to do that. So let's close that. File, New. Let's title this Bob. And then we should be able to see our band template that we created. And there's our band template. Let's just put this as a flat tempo, Let's put this at 160. Next. And then you can obviously change this if you want to. Finish. And there's our bob piece based off our band template. I hope you enjoyed this segment of the video. Let's go on to the next segment. So in this segment of the video, I'm going to show you how you can create parts as well as export PDFs, create MIDI files, and export music XMLs. So let's go down to File, then go to Parts, and we have New All and New. New basically gives you the option to select an instrument and then create a part for that instrument, while New All selects everything and you have all the parts created for you. So I'm just going to hit New All, then hit OK. And now I have all the parts. Fair warning, sometimes you get collisions like these and they look unprofessional. You're going to have to go into every single part and kind of meticulously fix all these collisions because, again, it looks unprofessional. And sometimes if a musician is looking at the score or looking at their part, it's unreadable if you have a bunch of collisions and nothing makes sense and it's unreadable and they can't play it. That's worst case scenario, but you get the gist of what I'm saying, hopefully. Another thing you can do is export any PDFs if you want to. So I can export a PDF if I want to, or I can export an audio file such as WAV. I wouldn't recommend MP3 because that doesn't work with Musescore that well. And another thing you can do is a MIDI file. I don't use MIDI file that often, but it's an option. Music XML, this is a standard between all notation programs like Finale, Flat, Syllabellus. Hopefully I'm saying that right, I don't know. But there's a compressed music XML file. This one is more favorable than this one, partly because this one sometimes is wonky, and when I bring it up on Musescore, it tends to display some really weird like programming jargon or whatever. So I would go with compressed music XML. And then uncompressed Musescore file, don't use this, just use the standard Musescore file format. So I think the main file formats you could use is PDF, WAV audio, compressed music XML, and that's essentially it. And then the MIDI. And that basically concludes this very short segment for exporting any PDFs and creating parts. So this is a piece I made a couple months ago. It's still pretty rough and I haven't touched it since. And the thing I want to bring to all of your guys' attention is the codas and the repeats. This is a good example of how you use it. I just am going to play it and show you how it's used, and we're going to hop over to a new score where I'll show you how you can implement a coda and a repeat. So here we go. I hope it's decent enough for your ears. It's a bit rough again, but in any case, here we go. And that was an example of using a repeat and a coda. So let's hop over to the Musescore, and I'll show you how you can implement both a coda and a repeat. Okay, now that I have the Musescore up, I'm going to show you how you can implement codas. I just put in some stuff right here, then some stuff right up here that I'll get to later. But this is how you implement a coda. So first, let's put in a signal right here, and then a 2 coda right over here. And then you want DS al coda right here, and then the coda over here. So it should do its basic jump. And then it's actually good practice to put this in double bar lines, just so you can separate the two segments. And there we go. And it should jump like I said before. And it does. And you can also add a repeat in there if you want to, which we might as well. So let's just put in a 2-bar repeat, and let's have at it. And that's how you put in a repeat, and then it's kind of mixed with a coda. It's kind of interesting. But make sure this is on, otherwise it won't play repeats. Musescore won't play it. And then another function that I didn't show you in previous videos was a looping function. So if you're trying to fix something and you need to loop playback, you're able to do so. So kind of, I'll show you. Hold down the shift key, select whatever you want, and then hit this little button, and then hit play. And it will continuously play back whatever you selected. That's just a little tip. And moving on to the next segment. So I'm going to show you a really good function of Musescore 2.1. It's pretty new, but it's really helpful, and that is swap with Clipboard. Now, there are 3 steps to swap with Clipboard. First, you cut, and then you swap with Clipboard, and then you paste. So first, let's select everything that we want, and then cut. Then I'm going to swap it with the horn part. Then I'm going to hit swap. And then I'm going to hit paste. Again, that is cut, swap, paste. And this is really useful if you want to swap out like trumpet 1 and trumpet 2 parts, or any sort of part that you just wanted to switch out. And it's a lot more handy in terms of like time saving, because sometimes I find myself cutting a certain part and then I cut another part and I've lost what I previously cut, and it's just a big mess. And swap with Clipboard significantly helps with that. So I'm going to cover some other things in the next segment of the video, so stay tuned for that. And moving on to the next segment. So in this last segment of the video, I'm going to show you how you can use a very good function that has been implemented in Musescore 2.1, and that is regroup rhythms. Regroup rhythms saves a ton of time in terms of notation problems and fixing them, and it's very useful in big score settings or normal score settings. Now, obviously, I made this because I don't think even Musescore would create this on a whim. So basically how you use it is select everything, you hit layout, and then regroup rhythms. Now it's legible. Another thing that I want to show you is the screenshot option. So I can select everything that I want, and then I hit right click, then save as screenshot mode, and then I can save it. This is great if you want to email like a picture to somebody or basically anything you want. Lastly, I want to cover is preferences. This is input and output. So if you want to use a MIDI keyboard for input, it's very useful in terms of saving time, and you can just play on the keyboard and put in a D, an E, C, whatever. I just want to say that usually with Musescore, you're going to have to plug in the MIDI keyboard beforehand and then boot up Musescore. This is where your keyboard should show up. Just make sure your drivers are installed. I might have mentioned that in a previous segment, but I think this is very useful. Also, with autosave, increase the autosave to probably like 5 minutes. Don't go to 2 minutes. I do that just because I don't save as often as I should. But overall, that's all I really wanted to cover. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask your score leader, or your score leader can contact me. That is fine. And I'll see you in the next video. Stay awesome.